Why would a gang leader protect a child's lemonade stand? The townsfolk couldn't believe their eyes. Asher Cole, leader of the Iron Serpents, had stepped off his gleaming motorcycle, removed his sunglasses, and told his men to leave the little girl alone. Why? Why would a man feared by every shopkeeper in Willow Creek suddenly shield a child instead of crushing her? Why would he place a $20 bill in her jaw and declare her stand untouchable? The answer was buried in the past, in a bitter family feud, in a hospital's betrayal, and in the eyes of the little girl herself. For when Asher looked at Emily, he didn't just see a child selling lemonade. He saw Grace, the sister he had lost to illness, the sister he had failed. But the Iron Serpents weren't built on mercy, and protecting Emily meant choosing between his gang and his blood. As whispers spread through town, the question hung heavy. Which side would Asher Cole choose? Willow Creek had once been a place where doors were left unlocked and laughter echoed across porches until nightfall. Summer evenings smelled of cut grass, and the sound of children chasing fireflies had been a comfort to tired workers returning home. But in recent months that rhythm had fractured. The steady roar of motorcycle engines now haunted the streets, their leather-clad riders claiming corners and storefronts that had never belonged to them. The Iron Serpents were not just a presence anymore. They were a shadow, stretching across every street like a storm no one could stop. For 7-year-old Emily Carter, though, this morning wasn't about shadows. It was about lemons, sugar, and a promise. She stood barefoot on the porch steps of her grandmother's house, hair falling from 2 loose braids that never quite stayed even. Her small hands gripped the wooden sign she had painted herself in clumsy, hopeful letters. Lemonade for love, $1 a cup. All money helps sick families. Beside her, Ranger waited, the German shepherd's posture a blend of alert readiness and quiet patience. His thick coat caught the morning light, every muscle under his scarred frame coiled yet calm. Around his neck still hung a service tag, weathered, dented, reminders of years spent in dusty battlefields, alongside soldiers who trusted him with their lives. Retirement hadn't softened him. It had only given him a new mission. The little girl now tying string around her sign. Inside the kitchen, Martha Carter, Emily's grandmother, sliced lemons with practiced care. The arthritis in her fingers made each movement stiff, but her determination was unyielding. She had seen her granddaughter's eyes, so much like her late daughter Grace's, when Emily first suggested the lemonade stand. Martha had tried to argue. Times were dangerous. The Iron Serpents made every corner feel unsafe. But Emily had been resolute. "Mommy asked me to help other families, Grandma. If we can't save everyone, we can at least try." That promise had been whispered in a hospital room just months earlier. Emily still remembered the sterile white walls, the beeping monitors, and the way her mother's voice had grown thin, like wind passing through cracked glass. Grace had squeezed her daughter's hand, eyes dimmed by illness, but still burning with the kind of love that anchored a child to the earth. "Emily," she had whispered, each syllable costing her strength. "Promise me you'll keep helping people, even when it's hard, even when I'm not here." The child had nodded fiercely, tears streaking her cheeks. "I promise, Mommy." That word, promise, became a thread Emily clung to in the weeks after Grace's funeral. It was what carried her out of bed when sadness felt too heavy. It was why she now stood on this porch, sign in hand, ready to face a world much harsher than the one her mother had wanted for her. Martha carried a glass pitcher filled with the golden mixture. setting it gently on the rickety table that served as their stand. Emily hopped down, placing the sign in front with pride. Ranger moved closer, lying across the edge of the porch steps in a position that gave him a full view of the street. His eyes swept left to right, never missing the faintest motion. "You remember what I told you, sweetheart," Martha said softly, brushing a strand of hair from Emily's cheek. "If trouble comes, stay behind Ranger," Emily finished for her, the seriousness in her voice too old for a child. Martha's heart ached at that. Childhood wasn't supposed to be defined by rules of survival, but this was Willow Creek now, and innocence had become a fragile thing. By mid-morning, the stand was open. The first customers trickled in, neighbors who knew the story, who had cried at Grace's funeral, who wanted to support the little girl carrying on her mother's fight. Mrs. Delaney from 2 houses over placed a $5 bill in the jar and told Emily to keep the change. Mr. Howard, the mailman, ruffled her hair as he bought a cup, blinking back emotion when he saw her determined smile. Each coin and bill dropped into the glass jar felt like a small victory, a brick laid on the foundation of her promise. Between customers, Emily would glance at the photograph taped to the side of the jar. Her mother, thin and pale, but smiling bravely from a hospital bed. It steadied her when grief threatened to break through. Ranger never strayed from his post. Sometimes he rested his head against Emily's knee, sensing the quiet waves of sadness rolling off her. Sometimes he lifted his ears at the sound of distant engines, body tensing until the threat faded again into silence. His presence was both shield and anchor, unspoken reassurance that no matter how fragile the world became, Emily would not face it alone. Martha watched from the porch rocker, her hands knitting with slow, stiff movements. She kept her gaze on the street, scanning every figure that passed. In her heart, she wanted this to be just another summer memory for her granddaughter. Sticky lemonade on hot days, laughter shared with neighbors, the sweetness of innocence. But she knew better. The iron serpents had taken too much already. Businesses shuttered, families bullied, and Grace, her daughter, had slipped away in a hospital that now whispered with rumors of corruption. Sometimes Martha wondered if the cancer had been the only battle Grace lost, or if there had been another fight, a quieter one, that no one in power had allowed her to win. The thought made her chest tighten. She looked at Emily, at the way the child carefully measured sugar for the next pitcher, lips moving as if repeating her mother's recipe. "The secret is a pinch of salt," Grace had always said, smiling through her pain. A memory bloomed, sharp and clear. Grace lying in that bed, Martha clutching her hand, Emily asleep on the chair beside them. Grace whispering through the dark, "Promise me you'll raise her strong. Promise me you won't let this town break her spirit." Martha had promised too. Now, as the sun rose higher and the shadows stretched long across Willow Creek, both promises, mother and grandmother, wove together in the fragile figure of a girl standing beside her lemonade stand, guarded by a dog who had seen too much war. For a few precious hours, there was laughter again. Coins clinked in the jar. Emily beamed each time she counted aloud the growing total, imagining how many families they could help. Martha forced herself to smile, though her eyes often strayed to the corner where the street bent sharply, because she knew, just as Ranger seemed to know, that peace in Willow Creek never lasted long anymore. By late morning, the rhythm of the lemonade stand had settled into something almost ordinary. Emily's laughter chimed whenever a customer dropped coins into the jar, and she made sure to thank each person as though their dollar might change the world. For her, maybe it could. Ranger stayed close, his body a quiet wall of protection. He lay at her feet, but it was never true rest. His ears twitched at every passing sound, his head lifted whenever footsteps drew near. His breathing was steady, controlled, like a soldier on watch. The scar above his right eye caught the sunlight, a reminder that he was no ordinary pet, but a survivor of places far harsher than Willow Creek. The air smelled of sugar and lemons, but beneath it lingered something else, an unease that no sweetness could cover. Martha, rocking slowly on the porch, felt it in her bones. She kept her hands busy with knitting, but her eyes never left the corner of the street. It was too quiet between customers, too tense in the spaces where laughter ought to live. Emily, oblivious to her grandmother's fear, served another glass with a bright smile. "That'll be $1, please. All the money helps families at the hospital." The customer, a young mother with a stroller, smiled back, pressing a bill into the jar. "Your mommy would be proud of you, sweetheart." Emily's smile faltered, but she quickly straightened, repeating the words she told herself each morning. "This is for her. This is the promise." Then came the sound. A low, guttural rumble, distant at first, but growing closer. It was the sound Willow Creek had learned to dread, the sound of engines that did not belong. The iron serpents. Ranger's head snapped up before anyone else reacted. His ears pricked forward, muscles tightening under his dark coat. He rose slowly, deliberately, moving in front of Emily without a sound. His tail lowered, his stance narrowing, a silent transformation from companion to sentinel. Emily looked down at him, puzzled. "What is it, boy?" The answer came as two motorcycles rounded the bend, chrome glinting, engines snarling. They slowed deliberately, tires crunching against the pavement as they pulled to the curb beside the little wooden stand. The bikers dismounted, boots heavy on the asphalt. Their vests bore the serpent emblem that had become the mark of fear in Willow Creek. One was broad-shouldered, head shaved smooth, tattoos crawling up his neck like creeping vines. The other was wiry, with sharp eyes and a smirk that never reached them. "Well, well," the tall one drawled, surveying the stand. "Ain't this precious?" Little lemonade princess, playing shopkeeper. His partner chuckled darkly, leaning down until his shadow stretched across the table. "You know what happens when you set up shop in Iron Serpent's territory, don't you?" Emily blinked, clutching the edge of her sign. Her voice wavered, but stayed polite, the way her grandmother had taught her. "It's $1 a cup. The money goes to the hospital to help sick families." The wiry one's smirk widened. "Cute. But here's the thing, kid. Businesses on our streets pay a fee. 20% of whatever you make. Protection money. Otherwise..." He let the word hang, his meaning sharpened by the way his fingers tapped against the knife, clipped to his belt. Martha rose from the porch, heart hammering. "Leave her alone," she called, her voice steadier than she felt. "She's just a child." The tall biker turned lazily toward her. "Lady, we don't care if she's selling lemonade or gold bricks. Rules are rules." He looked back down at Emily. "So what's it gonna be, princess? Pay up, or we shut you down?" Emily swallowed hard. Her small hand found Ranger's fur, fingers tangling in his thick coat as though anchoring herself. "My daddy says I only have to give money to people who need it. The hospital needs it, not you." The taller biker laughed, a sound more cruel than amused. "I don't see no daddy around here, just a girl and her mutt." That was the breaking point. Ranger shifted forward, one paw at a time, placing himself squarely between Emily and the bikers. He did not bark. He was too disciplined for that. But his posture spoke louder than any growl could. Head lowered, ears forward, body coiled to strike. His dark eyes locked onto theirs, unflinching, unblinking, and in them was something primal, the gaze of a soldier who had measured men before and found them wanting. The wiry biker's smirk faltered. He stepped back half a pace before catching himself. "That dog don't scare me," he muttered, but his eyes flickered uneasily. The tall one sneered, but his bravado thinned at the sight of Ranger's precision stance, the kind no backyard pet would ever hold. This was military training, ingrained in every taut muscle. He raised his hands mockingly. "Fine, soldier dog. We'll give you till tomorrow. Have our cut ready, 20%, or this little stand gets smashed. Permanently." He shoved a hand against the table, making the pitcher wobble dangerously before jerking back with a grin. Then both men mounted their bikes, engines roaring to life. The smell of exhaust filled the air as they pulled away, laughter trailing like smoke behind them. Emily's knees shook, but she stood tall, just as her father had taught her. She had not agreed, only nodded, just enough to acknowledge their words without giving in. A Brighton never backed down from bullies, her daddy always said. When the bikes disappeared, silence rushed in. Emily released Ranger's fur, realizing only then how tightly she had been gripping him. The dog eased back slightly, but his eyes remained fixed on the horizon, watching for threats unseen. Martha hurried to Emily's side, her voice low and urgent. "Pack up, sweetheart. We're done for today." "But Grandma," Emily began, chin lifting with stubborn resolve, "I promised Mommy I'd help the families." Martha knelt, her arthritic knees protesting, and placed both hands on her granddaughter's shoulders. "Your mother would want you safe first. Do you hear me? Safe." Emily's lips trembled, but Ranger nudged her hand with his nose, a soft whine escaping his throat. He seemed to say, "I'll protect you. Whatever comes, I'll stand in the way." And as Martha gathered the picture and sign, Emily whispered to the photo taped to the jar, "I won't stop, Mommy. Not for them. Not for anyone." Ranger's eyes never left the street. Because somewhere beyond the curve, the Iron Serpents were already planning their return. The roar of engines had only just faded when a new sound rose in its place. Deeper, heavier, commanding. One motorcycle, not two. Its growl filled the narrow street like thunder rolling low across the plains. Even Ranger's ears shifted, his stance tightening as he turned toward the bend. Martha froze on the porch steps, her arms still full of the lemonade pitcher and sign. She had lived long enough to know the difference between noise and presence. This was presence. Whoever rode that bike carried power with him, and not just the mechanical kind. The machine appeared, sleek and black, its chrome catching the late sun like shards of fire. The rider sat tall, broad-shouldered, silver streaks glinting through his dark hair. His boots hit the ground with a measured finality as he dismounted. The leather cut across his back bore the Iron Serpent's emblem, but unlike the others, his was marked with rank. President Asher Cole, the leader himself. He removed his sunglasses slowly, deliberately, revealing eyes that swept the scene with quiet calculation. His face was carved by years of hard roads and harder choices. Deep lines, a jaw set in stone. The air seemed to hold its breath around him. Emily shrank behind Ranger instinctively, clutching a corner of his vest. The dog's body pressed forward, shielding her completely. Martha took one step down from the porch, heart pounding. She knew the name. Everyone in Willow Creek did. But to see him here, standing in the middle of her street, staring at her granddaughter, it was something else entirely. The two bikers from earlier stiffened when they saw him. Their bravado melted into something closer to fear. One stammered, "Boss, we were just—" "Shut up." Asher's voice was not loud, but it cut sharper than any blade. The men fell silent immediately. He stepped closer to the stand, his boots crunching over gravel, until he stood within arm's reach of Emily and Ranger. The dog bristled, lips curling just enough to flash white teeth, but Asher didn't flinch. Instead, he crouched slightly, lowering himself to Emily's level without crossing Ranger's invisible boundary. "So," he said, his tone softer now, "you're the little lemonade seller my men can't stop talking about." Emily said nothing. Her small hand gripped Ranger's collar like a lifeline. Her eyes, blue, steady, stubborn, met his without wavering. Something flickered in Asher's gaze. For a moment, it wasn't the hardened leader of the Iron Serpents staring back, but a man caught off guard, as though he'd just seen a ghost. He straightened, looking over his shoulder at his men. "Listen closely," he commanded. "This stand, this girl, off limits, permanently. You lay a hand on her, you answer to me." The taller biker's mouth fell open. "But boss, the rules—" "I make the rules." Asher's eyes narrowed dangerously. "And this one is carved in stone. Do you understand?" The two men nodded hastily, their earlier cruelty evaporating under his authority. Martha's breath caught. She couldn't explain it, but when Asher turned back toward Emily, she felt an ache deep in her chest. There was something there, behind the steel and shadow, a trace of familiarity she hadn't expected. The tilt of his brow, the way his eyes lingered. It was like looking at someone she once knew, someone she had begged not to throw his life away. Her hands trembled. Could it be? No, that boy was gone, buried under years of anger and rebellion. Yet the longer she looked, the more the resemblance burned in her. Emily, still half hidden by Ranger, spoke finally, her voice small but clear. "Why are you helping me?" Asher studied her for a long moment. His answer was simple, almost too simple. "Because some people don't deserve to be hurt." It wasn't the kind of thing a biker boss said. It wasn't the kind of thing a feared outlaw admitted out loud. But it hung there, unshakable, as though the words belonged to someone older, someone tied to a past that refused to let him go. Ranger, still tense, tilted his head, as if measuring him. The dog didn't retreat, but the growl in his chest eased into silence. Asher slipped his sunglasses back on, retreating a step. "Keep selling your lemonade, kid. No one in this town will touch you." With that, he turned, mounting his motorcycle in one fluid motion. The engine roared to life, echoing against the houses. But before he pulled away, his gaze flicked once more to Martha. It lingered just long enough for her to see it clearly now, the ghost of the boy she once called brother, the boy who had walked away decades ago after a fight that shattered their family. Her throat tightened. She whispered his name so softly, even Emily didn't hear it. Asher. The bike tore down the street, leaving exhaust and silence in its wake. Emily loosened her grip on Ranger's collar, though she kept her eyes fixed on the corner where the man had disappeared. "Grandma," she whispered. "He looked at me like he knew me." Martha forced a smile, though her heart hammered with the weight of recognition. Sometimes, child, people see things they've lost. But inside, she knew the truth. She had seen that look before, long ago, in another pair of eyes that had once laughed, once softened, before the world hardened them. And if she was right, if the man who had just shielded her granddaughter from harm was truly who she thought he was, then this story was no longer just about bikers and threats. It was about blood, about a past that had come roaring back into their lives on the back of a motorcycle. Martha closed her eyes, whispering to herself as Ranger settled once more at Emily's side. God help us. He's family. The house was quiet that night, too quiet for Martha to sleep. Emily had finally drifted off in her small bed. Ranger curled protectively at her feet, his chest rising and falling in slow, rhythmic breaths. The dog didn't seem to need rest as much as humans did. He was always half alert, even in dreams. Martha sat by the kitchen window with a cup of tea gone cold in her hands. Outside, the street lay dark, only the occasional flicker of a street lamp breaking the stillness. But her thoughts weren't in the present. They were far away, tugged backward by the sight of Asher Cole that afternoon, the way he had stood in front of the lemonade stand, commanding bikers twice his size, and yet, in a fleeting moment, carried the face of someone she once loved, like blood itself. She had tried to bury those memories. For decades, she had told herself the boy she once knew was gone, but tonight they returned, sharp and unrelenting. She remembered him first as a boy, Asher Rowan, back when they both carried their father's last name, had been all restless energy and wild laughter. A boy with hair that never stayed combed, with a grin that made teachers forgive his mischief, and with a heart that always seemed to beat a little faster than the rest of the world's. He was 3 years younger than Martha, and from the time he could walk, he had followed her everywhere, barefoot across summer fields, along the edges of the creek, into the barn where they whispered secrets about the future. Asher, she used to scold, laughing when he tumbled into the hay. You'll never make anything of yourself if you can't stay still. And he would grin back, eyes flashing with a promise too big for his small frame. Just watch me, Marty. I'm going to be somebody. He meant it. Everyone saw the spark in him. His teachers, the preacher, even the neighbors who shook their heads at his reckless streak admitted that boy had promise. If only he could find the right road. But the roads in Willow Creek had always been narrow, and their father's house even narrower. The memory that haunted her most was the night everything broke. It was late summer, the cicadas screaming in the trees. Martha had been in the kitchen, washing dishes, when she heard the shouting. Their father's voice, booming, furious, and Asher's, lower but sharp, fueled by the kind of pride that never bends. You'll do as I say, boy, their father roared. You'll work in the mill, like every man in this family has. I ain't your mill slave, Asher spat back, voice shaking with fury. I'm not wasting my life in sawdust and splinters just because you did. Martha ran to the doorway, her heart pounding as she saw them, her father, red-faced, fists clenched, and her brother, tall for his age, chest heaving with defiance. He was barely 17. You think you're better than us? Their father growled. You'll end up nothing, less than nothing. Asher's jaw tightened. Maybe nothing's better than being chained here. The words struck like a slap. Their father's hand rose, but Martha moved between them, desperate. Stop it! Both of you, stop! Her father's eyes burned, but he dropped his hand, muttering curses as he stormed from the room. That left Asher standing there, trembling with rage, a duffel bag already slung over his shoulder. Martha turned to him, her throat tight. Asher, no, don't do this. His face was pale, but his eyes were set, cold and determined. I can't stay, Marty. Not another day in this house. Not another day being told I'm worthless. You're not worthless, she whispered fiercely, gripping his arm. "You're my brother. You're the best of us. Please, please don't leave like this." For a moment, she thought she saw hesitation in his eyes, a flicker of the boy who used to chase fireflies with her in the fields. But then he shook his head, pulling free. "I don't belong here," he said. "Not in this house. Not in this town." And with that, he walked out the door, boots crunching on the gravel drive. Martha followed him onto the porch, calling his name into the night until her voice broke. But Asher never turned back. The last image she carried of him was the tail light of a borrowed motorcycle disappearing into the dark. Martha blinked against the tears that stung her eyes even now, decades later. She pressed a trembling hand to her mouth, whispering the words she had begged that night. "Please stay. Please don't leave me with him." But he had left, and the silence he left behind had stretched into years of regret. When word first reached Willow Creek that Asher had joined an outlaw motorcycle club, she refused to believe it. Not the boy who had once sworn to make something of himself, not the brother who used to carry her books home from school, but rumor after rumor piled on. Fights in neighboring towns, arrests, the name Iron Serpents, whispered in the same breath. Martha stopped listening after a while. It hurt too much. Better to pretend he had vanished forever than to imagine the boy she loved becoming the man people feared. And now he was back. Not just in town, but standing at her granddaughter's lemonade stand, ordering his men to leave the child alone. His voice had been colder, harder, but she had seen it, the glimmer in his eyes. That same defiance, that same stubborn streak that once refused to bend, even if it broke everything else. Her tea had gone stone cold in her hands. She set it down, staring out the window into the night. Ranger shifted in the next room, as if sensing the storm inside her. Martha whispered aloud, her voice cracking. "Why now, Asher? Why come back now?" She closed her eyes, but the memories wouldn't let her rest. She could still hear his promise in her ears, words spoken when they were children, long before the fights, long before the anger. "Don't worry, Marty. I'll always look out for you." A promise broken. And yet, when he looked at Emily that day, Martha thought she saw the faintest flicker of it returning. The next morning broke with the faint golden light of summer, filtering through lace curtains. The house smelled faintly of lemons and old wood, the air thick with quiet after a restless night. Emily sat at the kitchen table, swinging her legs back and forth, the soles of her shoes tapping against the chair. She stared into her bowl of oatmeal, stirring it with a spoon she had no intention of lifting to her mouth. Ranger sat nearby, as always, close enough that his fur brushed her knee. His ears twitched at every clink of metal against ceramic, but his eyes were fixed on Emily's face. He seemed to sense her mood, just as he always did. Finally, she spoke, her voice small but steady. "Grandma?" Martha, at the sink rinsing dishes, glanced back. "Yes, sweetheart?" Emily hesitated, lips pressing together, before the words tumbled out. "Why did the scary man help me yesterday?" Martha's hands froze on the dish she was holding. The question landed heavy, sharper than she expected. She forced herself to continue scrubbing, though her shoulders stiffened. "I don't know what you mean," she said carefully. "Lots of people help when they see trouble." Emily shook her head, braids brushing her shoulders. "Not like that. The bikers, they were mean. They wanted to hurt my stand. But then he came, and they listened to him, like they were afraid." She paused, spoon clattering against the bowl. Why would someone like him tell them not to hurt me? Martha dried her hands slowly, buying time. She turned, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Maybe even people who seem scary can surprise us sometimes. But Emily wasn't satisfied. Her 7-year-old mind had already learned to sense when adults dodged the truth. She narrowed her eyes, studying her grandmother's face with the same piercing look that used to belong to Grace. "You know him, don't you?" she whispered. The air in the kitchen seemed to still. Martha's heart thudded painfully in her chest. For a moment, she thought about telling her the truth about Asher, about the boy he once was. But the weight of that story, the years of regret and shame, pressed too heavily on her tongue. "No," Martha said softly, but too quickly. "I just know his type, and I don't want you near him, Emily. Do you understand?" Emily frowned, sensing the lie. Children might not always understand words, but they knew when love twisted into fear. Before she could press further, Ranger suddenly rose, a low growl rumbling from his chest. His ears shot forward, his eyes locking on Martha, as if he understood every word that had been said. The mention of the scary man had stirred him. Emily reached out instinctively, resting a hand on the thick fur of his neck. "It's okay, boy," she murmured. But Ranger didn't relax. His gaze flicked between the two of them, sharp and unblinking, as though demanding the truth Martha wasn't giving. Martha looked at the dog, unsettled. She had seen him behave this way in Afghanistan, when she visited Grace and her husband years ago. Ranger had been younger then, all muscle and discipline, trained to react to threats invisible to others. But this wasn't a battlefield. This was her kitchen. The growl faded, but Ranger remained tense, tail stiff, his body angled toward Martha like he could smell the secret she carried. Emily leaned closer, her voice barely a whisper. "See? Even Ranger knows. He doesn't like it when we talk about the scary man." Martha knelt beside her granddaughter, cupping her small face in her weathered hands. "Listen to me, Emily. There are people in this world who wear darkness like a coat. They may help one moment and hurt the next. That man, you can't trust him. Not ever." "But he looked at me." Emily's eyes clouded, confusion battling with the innocence still clinging to her. "He looked at me like he knew me, like he cared." Martha's throat tightened. That was the truth she had feared most. Emily had seen it too. She pulled the girl into an embrace, holding her against her chest. "Sometimes, child, our eyes play tricks when we want answers. You just focus on your stand, on your promise to your mama. Leave the rest to me." Emily pressed her cheek against her grandmother's shoulder, but didn't reply. She didn't need to. Martha felt the stubborn set of her jaw, the same one Grace used to have whenever she was determined. Emily wasn't done with her questions. She would come back to them again and again until the truth came out. Ranger padded closer, resting his head against Emily's knee. The girl stroked his fur absent-mindedly, her gaze still on her grandmother. "Grandma?" she asked softly. "If he's really bad, why didn't Ranger bite him?" Martha's breath caught. She had wondered the same thing. Instead of answering, she stood and busied herself with folding the dish towel, though her hands shook. "Eat your breakfast, sweetheart. We've got another long day ahead." Emily sighed, stirring her oatmeal once more but not eating. "Okay," she whispered. but the question lingered in her eyes, unspoken but heavy. "What are you not telling me?" From his place by her chair, Ranger lifted his head again, watching Martha with an intensity that bordered on accusation. His silence was louder than any growl. That night, after Emily had finally gone to bed, Martha stood by the window again, staring out into the dark. The street was quiet, but she couldn't shake the feeling that eyes were out there, watching, waiting. In the next room, Ranger shifted restlessly. Each time she whispered Asher's name under her breath, the dog's ears flicked, a faint growl curling low in his chest. It was as if he too remembered, as if he too carried a piece of the past she was trying so desperately to hide. Night had settled over Willow Creek, the kind of stillness that only small towns seem to know. Porch lights glowed faintly, moths circling their halos. The streets lay mostly empty, save for the occasional groan of a distant engine echoing against the hills. High above the town, on a ridge where weeds grew tall around scattered stones, a lone figure stood with a cigarette burning between his fingers. The ember glowed red with each inhale, then dimmed as smoke drifted into the dark. Asher Cole, the president of the Iron Serpents. The mothers warned their children about the shadow that Willow Creek had learned to live under. And tonight, he wasn't at the bar with his men. He wasn't planning the next intimidation run or counting the cut from protection fees. Tonight, he stood on the hill overlooking his sister's house, Grace's old home, now Martha's refuge, watching light spill warmly from the kitchen window. Through that glass, he saw a scene that twisted something deep in his chest. Emily. She sat on the floor, laughing as she tugged on a length of knotted rope. On the other end, Ranger growled playfully, the mighty German shepherd feigning resistance before letting her win. The girl tumbled backward in victory, giggling so loudly Asher swore he could almost hear it through the walls. The sound, her laughter, her joy, it cut sharper than any knife. Asher whispered into the night, barely audible over the rustling grass. Grace's eyes. He saw it clearly, even from this distance. That same piercing blue, that same stubborn light, the way she tilted her head when she smiled. It was Grace, reborn. He turned his face away, squeezing his eyes shut. He had tried for years not to think of his sister. Not after the way he'd left, not after the choices he'd made. But seeing Emily now, it was like a wound he thought had scarred over was torn open again, bleeding raw regret into the night. He remembered Grace as a child, running barefoot down this same hill, her laughter chasing him. She had been his protector once, standing between him and their father's rage, just like Martha tried to now. Grace, who wrote him letters when he first disappeared into the outlaw world, letters he never answered because shame made the distance easier. And then the news had come. Grace was sick, dying. He had promised himself he would see her before the end, but he never did. Cowardice, pride, fear. He wasn't sure which had held him back. Now it was too late. All that was left was Emily. Ike. Asher flicked the cigarette to the ground, grinding it beneath his boot. His hands curled into fists as he fought the war inside himself. The Iron Serpents were his life. For more than 20 years, the gang had been his family, his shield, his way to bury the boy who had once wanted more. They had bled with him, followed him, made him into the man whose name carried weight in every back alley from here to the state line. To betray them was to betray himself. And yet, every instinct screamed that the girl in that house, the little lemonade seller with Grace's eyes, was more than any patch on his back. She was blood. She was a second chance at something he thought was long gone. he cursed under his breath, dragging a hand through his hair. "Damn you, Grace," he muttered. "Why'd you leave her here for me to find?" Asher knew the rules of his world. Blood meant little in the face of loyalty. The serpents expected obedience, strength, and above all, silence. If his men even suspected the truth, that the child he had just declared off-limits was his own niece, they would see it as weakness. And weakness in their world was death. But when he closed his eyes, he saw Emily's face again. That stubborn tilt of her chin. That fearless defiance when she told his men she wouldn't pay them a cent. It was the same fire that once burned in Grace. And it scared him, because he knew exactly how the world treated fire like that. Below, the light in the kitchen dimmed as Martha turned it off. The house sank into darkness, save for the glow of Emily's nightlight in the upstairs window. Ranger appeared then, slipping onto the porch like a sentry changing guard. The German shepherd padded to the steps, ears swiveling, nose lifted to the night. For a heartbeat, Asher swore the dog looked directly at him. Across the distance, across the shadows, as if recognizing him. The hair on the back of Asher's neck prickled. Ranger was no ordinary mutt. He moved with precision, every muscle disciplined, every glance sharp. It reminded Asher of stories he had heard whispered by veterans at the bar, about canines that could read a man's intent like a book, who carried loyalty deeper than blood. "Of course she's got you," Asher muttered softly. Grace always did have an angel watching her back. He turned away then, unable to watch any longer. His bike waited at the base of the ridge, its chrome glinting faintly under the moonlight. As he walked, the war inside him raged louder. Could he keep playing both sides? Could he wear the serpent's patch by day and guard Emily by night? Sooner or later, the two worlds would collide. And when they did, something or someone would burn. Asher paused at the bike, staring back at the small house one last time. "You'll have to choose," he whispered to himself. "Gang or family?" The wind carried his words down into the sleeping town, but no one heard them. No one, except maybe Ranger, who lifted his head on the porch, ears pricked, as if he understood. Asher swung his leg over the motorcycle and started the engine. The roar shattered the silence, echoing off the hills like a battle cry. But even as he sped into the night, one truth clung to him like a shadow he couldn't shake. Blood runs deeper than brotherhood, and Emily Carter was his blood. The jar clinked with every careful step Emily took, her small arms wrapped around the glass as though it were a treasure chest. Inside, coins and folded bills gleamed faintly in the morning light. Each dollar carried the fingerprints of neighbors who had paused at her stand, some out of pity, some out of admiration, all out of hope. Martha walked beside her, one hand steadying Emily's shoulder, the other gripping her cane. Ranger padded at Emily's side, his vest strapped on, tags glinting softly. To the casual eye, he looked calm, but Martha knew his posture too well. The way his tail stayed level, the way his head swiveled at each sound, it was vigilance wrapped in fur. St. Gabriel's Hospital rose at the end of the block, its brick facade and sterile windows more imposing than inviting. Once, Martha had thought of it as a place of healing. It was where her daughter Grace had fought for breath, where every corridor smelled of antiseptic and desperation. Now each brick seemed colder, shadows clinging even in daylight. Emily's sneakers squeaked on the polished floors as they entered. The lobby smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and something metallic, a scent that carried Martha back to nights of waiting by Grace's bed. Her chest tightened, but she forced herself to breathe steady for Emily's sake. The receptionist glanced up, her painted smile faltering as soon as she saw the jar. Martha caught the flicker. Annoyance, maybe even fear, but Emily didn't notice. She marched forward, chin high, as if this place had been built for her mission. "I'd like to make a donation," Emily said, her small voice carrying across the marble. She set the jar on the counter with a soft thud. "For families who can't pay for medicine. It's what my mama wanted." The receptionist hesitated, then pressed a button on her phone. "Dr. Walsh," she murmured. "She's here, doctor." Gregory Walsh arrived minutes later, his polished shoes clicking against the floor. He was a tall man with neatly combed silver hair, a suit too fine for a small-town hospital administrator. His smile was professional, but it never reached his eyes. "Well," he said, his voice smooth as glass, "you must be Emily Carter. I've heard so much about you." Emily's blue eyes brightened with pride. "I raised it all with my lemonade stand. Every penny is for the hospital, so no one has to be sad like my mommy was." Walsh's gaze flicked briefly to the jar, then to Ranger, who had risen to stand protectively at Emily's side. The dog's stare was unwavering, as if peeling back the administrator's polished veneer. Walsh shifted slightly, clearing his throat. "That's admirable," he said. "Truly. Such a young girl, so full of charity." He reached for the jar, but Ranger stepped forward, a deep rumble vibrating in his chest. "Ranger," Martha warned softly, placing a hand on his back. The dog stilled but didn't move his eyes from Walsh. Walsh's smile tightened. He lifted the jar with careful hands, as though its weight offended him. "Every contribution helps, of course," he said. "Though, I must remind you, funds like this are often redirected into broader hospital improvements. New equipment, administrative costs, things families rarely see firsthand." Emily frowned. "But I wanted it to go to the families." "That's what Mama said. For people who can't pay." Walsh crouched slightly, lowering himself to her eye level. His eyes were sharp, his smile just a little too polished. "Sometimes, sweetheart, the best way to help patients is to make sure the hospital stays strong. That's how we save lives. Do you understand?" Emily's fingers tightened on Ranger's collar. "No," she whispered. "I don't." The silence stretched. Finally, Martha stepped forward, her voice cool. "We trust you'll see that the money goes where it was promised, Dr. Walsh." "To the families." Walsh rose smoothly, setting the jar on the counter with a faint clink. "Of course," he said, though his tone left no comfort. "You have my word." But Martha had lived long enough to know when a man's word was worth nothing. As they turned to leave, Emily tugged at Martha's sleeve. "Grandma, why didn't he look happy? Don't people like money to help sick folks?" Martha forced a smile. "Some people don't know how to show gratitude. That doesn't mean what you're doing isn't right." Ranger suddenly halted in the corridor, ears pricked, nose twitching. His body stiffened, head turning sharply toward a side hallway. Emily followed his gaze. A man in scrubs was pushing a crate on a dolly, the wood slats stamped with pharmaceutical markings. The man froze when he saw them watching. His eyes darted to the dog, then he shoved the dolly forward quickly, disappearing into a staff-only door. Emily whispered, "What's in there?" Martha tugged her gently along. "Nothing for us to worry about." But her stomach twisted. Grace had once complained about missing doses, about medications arriving late. Could that crate have been one of them? Ranger looked back at the closed door, teeth bared silently, as though he knew what lay inside wasn't healing at all, but something darker. By the time they stepped outside into the sunlight, the weight of the hospital clung to Martha's shoulders. Emily carried herself with determination, but even she seemed quieter, her small hands twisting the hem of her shirt. "Grandma," she said softly, "Mama wanted me to help. But what if they're not helping?" Martha pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "Then we'll make sure they do, one way or another." She looked back at the red brick building, its windows gleaming like watchful eyes. Inside, behind polished doors and polished smiles, secrets festered. And Martha knew this was only the beginning. The air inside St. Gabriel's was heavy, not just with antiseptic, but with something unspoken, an undercurrent that Martha could feel in her bones. She walked beside Emily down the main corridor, the sound of their footsteps echoing faintly off the linoleum. Ranger kept pace, head low, muscles taut beneath his service vest. His nails clicked against the floor, each sound sharp and deliberate. Emily clutched Martha's hand. She was still proud of her donation, but her small brows furrowed. "Grandma, he didn't even say thank you," she whispered, thinking of Dr. Walsh. Before Martha could answer, a voice called softly behind them. "Mrs. Carter? Miss Emily?" They turned. A woman in pale blue scrubs stood near the nurse's station, her graying hair pulled back in a neat bun, her eyes gentle but watchful. She glanced quickly toward the hallway where Dr. Walsh had disappeared, then motioned for them to step aside. Martha recognized her vaguely. Evelyn Harper, a nurse who had been at St. Gabriel's for decades. She had once tended Grace during her final weeks. Emily brightened. "You helped my mommy," she said, without hesitation. Evelyn's face softened. She bent down so her eyes were level with Emily's. "Yes, sweetheart, I remember. Your mama was one of the bravest women I've ever known." Emily's eyes glistened. She squeezed Ranger's collar, as if drawing strength from him. "I promised her I'd help the families here. That's why I made the lemonade stand." Evelyn reached out, brushing a stray lock of hair from the girl's forehead. Her smile was warm, but Martha saw the tension in her jaw, the quick dart of her gaze toward the security cameras above. "You're doing a wonderful thing, Emily," Evelyn said softly. Then, her tone shifted, lower, meant only for Martha. "But you need to know something. The money you've been raising, it isn't going where you think." Martha's stomach clenched. "What do you mean?" Evelyn straightened, folding her arms as though she were making casual conversation. "There are discrepancies," she murmured, her lips barely moving. "The donations that come in, especially the large ones, they never make it to the patient fund. They're redirected. The families you want to help, they don't see a cent." Martha's hand tightened on Emily's shoulder. "Redirected to where?" But Evelyn only shook her head. "Not here. Not now. Too many ears." Her voice dropped further. "Just be careful. St. Gabriel's isn't what it seems." Emily looked between them, confused. "Grandma, what does she mean?" Martha forced a smile, patting her hand. "Nothing you need to worry about, darling. We'll talk later." But her own voice trembled. Ranger suddenly stopped in his tracks, a growl reverberating from deep in his chest. His hackles rose, his gaze fixed on the far end of the corridor. Martha followed his stare. A man in hospital scrubs was pushing a dolly with a large crate strapped to it. The crate bore the faded stamp of a pharmaceutical supplier. The man avoided their eyes, walking briskly toward a side door marked "Authorized Personnel Only." Ranger's growl deepened, lips peeling back to reveal sharp teeth. The sound turned heads at the nurse's station, and Evelyn quickly reached down, resting a calming hand on his head. "Easy, boy," she whispered. "You can smell it too, can't you?" Martha's heart pounded. "What's in those crates?" she demanded quietly. Evelyn's expression tightened, but she didn't answer directly. "Ask yourself this," she said, straightening again. "If the hospital has all the resources it claims, why do families still go without treatment? Why are children turned away unless their parents donate first?" Emily's small voice piped up, soft but insistent. "Mama said medicine should help people, not make them scared." The nurse's eyes glistened. She bent and kissed Emily's forehead quickly, as if giving her a blessing. "Your mama was right. Don't let anyone make you believe otherwise." With that, Evelyn hurried back toward the station, her shoulders stiff. She didn't look back. They stepped out into the afternoon sun, but the light felt colder somehow. Emily held on to Ranger's leash, her lips pressed tight. "Grandma?" she whispered. "She said the money doesn't help the families. Does that mean my promise didn't count?" Martha knelt on the steps, pulling Emily close. "No, sweetheart. Your promise counts more than anything. But sometimes the people who should protect the sick don't do what's right. Sometimes they lie." Emily's eyes widened. "Like bullies?" "Yes," Martha said softly, brushing a tear from her cheek. "Like bullies." Ranger leaned against them, his warm body anchoring them to the present. His ears swiveled toward the hospital doors, his growl faint but unrelenting, as if he too knew the walls inside were hiding more than medicine. Martha looked back at the building, unease twisting in her gut. Grace had suspected something before she died. Martha remembered the whispered words in the hospital bed, the plea for Emily to keep helping others. What if Grace had known more than she ever said aloud? The jar of lemonade money had been a symbol of hope, but today it had left Martha with nothing but questions. Seeds of doubt had been planted, and she knew in her bones they would grow. The diner on Main Street was half empty, its chrome stools and checkered floor holding the kind of silence only small towns carried. Martha Carter pushed open the door with one hand, Emily's small palm nestled in her other, Ranger slipping in at their heels with practiced obedience. The bell above the door jingled, drawing a few glances. The smell of fried bacon and burnt coffee hung in the air. At first glance, it seemed ordinary, but Martha had lived long enough to know that small towns did most of their talking over chipped mugs and half-eaten pie. Secrets floated here, disguised as casual conversation. Emily climbed onto a stool, her legs swinging freely, while Ranger settled at her feet. The German shepherd's body pressed against her sneakers, steady as a wall. Martha ordered Emily a grilled cheese, and herself nothing but coffee, though she doubted she'd drink it. It didn't take long. At the far booth, two men leaned close, their voices low but edged with bitterness. Told Peterson straight to his face, "My wife needed that treatment. They said the slots were full. Then the mayor's cousin shows up the next week, miraculously approved. You tell me that's fate?" The other man shook his head, stabbing his fork into his eggs. "It ain't fate. It's money. Everyone knows the board takes bribes." "And who do you think enforces the payments when folks start asking questions?" "Iron serpents. I've seen them hauling boxes out the back of St. Gabriel's like it's their personal warehouse." Martha froze, her spoon halfway to the coffee cup. She lowered it quietly, pretending to adjust Emily's napkin, but her ears caught every word. At the next table, two women chimed in, their voices sharper with grief. My sister begged for that trial drug. Dr. Walsh told her it wasn't available. 3 weeks later, a councilman's wife is suddenly cured. Makes you wonder what's truth and what's paperwork lies. The second woman shook her head, her hand trembling as she stirred her tea. My boy was turned away too. They said the hospital couldn't cover it. He didn't make it. I still see those bikers outside the loading dock, laughing while carrying crates marked pharmaceutical supplies. Tell me why a hospital needs the iron serpents to move medicine. The table fell quiet, heavy with unsaid words, until someone muttered, almost spitting it out. Because it ain't medicine they're moving. It's for profit. Martha's chest tightened. She reached for Emily's hand, needing the grounding warmth. The child was happily dipping her sandwich into a bowl of tomato soup, blissfully unaware of the poison lacing the air around them. But Martha couldn't unhear it. Words like trial drug, bribes, denied access. They crashed against her mind, colliding with memories she had tried to bury. Grace lying in the hospital bed, whispering, "They said it's not available for me. But I heard the nurse say it was working for someone else." At the time, Martha had chalked it up to delirium, to hope clouded by morphine. But what if Grace had been right? What if she hadn't just lost her daughter to cancer, but to corruption? Ranger shifted suddenly, lifting his head, ears snapping toward the booth of men again. His growl rolled low, like thunder muffled by distance. Emily reached down quickly, soothing him with small fingers in his fur. "It's okay, boy," she whispered. But her wide eyes turned up to Martha, filled with a child's intuition. "Why's he mad?" Martha forced a tight smile. "He just doesn't like loud voices, sweetheart. Eat your sandwich." But she knew better. Ranger didn't growl at noise. He growled at danger. The waitress, a weary-looking woman named Janine, poured more coffee into Martha's cup, then leaned close enough that her words barely rose above a whisper. "You didn't hear it from me," she murmured. "But the hospital's dirty, Martha. Been dirty for a long time. They're in bed with the serpents, and it's the families who pay the price." Her eyes flicked to Emily, then softened. "You're doing a good thing with that lemonade stand. But watch your back." "And hers." Martha swallowed hard, nodding once. Her throat felt raw. When Janine moved away, Martha looked at Emily again, at the small blue eyes that mirrored Grace's. The little girl hummed under her breath, Ranger's head resting in her lap as she shared tiny pieces of bread with him. So innocent, so certain the world was good. Martha clenched her hands in her lap until her knuckles whitened. She couldn't protect Grace from the lies of men like Walsh and the grip of gangs like the serpents. But Emily still had a chance. On their way out of the diner, the whispers followed her. "Brighton's girl raising money. The hospital's just bleeding her dry. The child doesn't know she's feeding the same wolves who killed her mama." Martha's chest constricted, every word like a stone added to the weight she carried. She stepped into the sunlight, but it didn't warm her. It only made the shadows sharper. Emily skipped ahead on the sidewalk, holding Ranger's leash, her braids bouncing. "Grandma, can we stop by the park before we go home?" Martha's voice caught. She forced it steady. "Not today, sweetheart. We need to get home." Emily pouted, but didn't argue. Ranger padded at her side, tail swaying like a metronome. But Martha saw it. His ears still turned back toward the diner, his nose twitching, his body taut. He had felt it too, the shift in the town, the rot spreading from behind hospital walls into every corner of Willow Creek. That night, as Martha tucked Emily into bed, The child looked up at her with drowsy eyes. "Grandma," she said softly, "Mama didn't die 'cause she broke her promise, right? She died 'cause she was sick." Martha froze. The innocence in the question tore her open. She smoothed Emily's hair, kissing her forehead. "Your mama was very sick," she whispered, "but she was also very strong. And she loved you more than anything." Emily smiled faintly, drifting into sleep. Ranger curled at the foot of her bed, his steady breathing filling the silence. But Martha sat in the dark long after, staring at the shadows on the wall. For the first time, she wondered if Grace's death hadn't been fate at all. Maybe it had been theft. The clock glowed at 2:17 a.m. in Emily's bedroom. The town outside was still, but Ranger wasn't. The German shepherd stood rigid at the window, ears pinned forward, a low growl rolling from his chest. Emily clutched her stuffed rabbit. "Ranger?" she whispered. He didn't move. His gaze was locked on the yard. With trembling fingers, she peeked through the curtain. Her breath caught. Men in leather vests lurked just beyond the porch light. Motorcycles parked crooked on the curb. One leaned against the railing, tapping it with a gloved finger, deliberate and taunting. Another lit a match, his smile flashing in the flare. Emily stumbled back. "Grandma," she whispered, "they're here." Martha's door opened. Years had slowed her body, but fear straightened her spine. She saw Ranger bristling at the door and didn't ask questions. She pulled Emily close and peeked out herself. The patch on the vests confirmed it. Iron serpents. They weren't supposed to be here. At her door, in the middle of the night. She had seen them on street corners, at gas stations, circling like vultures. But never like this. "They want us afraid," Martha murmured, steadying Emily. "But we won't give them that." Ranger barked sharply, the sound cracking the silence. His claws scraped the wood as he lunged toward the door, his amber eyes blazing. The men outside faltered, muttering uneasily, before retreating to their bikes. Engines roared to life, but as one mounted, he turned his head toward the window. "This ain't over." Then they were gone, their thunder fading into the night. Emily clung to Ranger's neck, burying her face in his fur. He licked her cheek once, but never turned from the door. Martha exhaled shakily, sinking into her chair. They weren't just watching anymore. They were circling. By morning, Willow Creek wore a thin, gray sky. Emily ate her cereal in silence. Ranger stretched beside her like a shadow. Every creak of the house sent his ears flicking. When Emily went to draw, Martha slipped into the closet at the end of the hall. She hadn't opened it in years. Beneath a warped plank lay a wooden box with a tarnished brass lock. Her fingers shook as she pulled it free. Inside were letters, files, and a cassette tape. Her daughter Grace's handwriting leapt from the page. "St. Gabriel's isn't what it says it is. They told me I didn't qualify for the trial drug, but Evelyn says I did." The next day, a councilman's wife was added to the list. Another page. Donations come in, and patients disappear. I've seen the serpents on the loading dock at night. Walsh says, "Partnerships keep us afloat. Mom, if something happens, remember the names. Walsh, Pierce, Wilson's brother." Martha pressed a hand to her mouth. These weren't ramblings. They were evidence. The serpents had been circling because Grace had uncovered something powerful enough to kill for. Ranger padded into the doorway. He sniffed the papers, his back stiffening. A low hum vibrated in his chest. Then he turned toward the window, ears tilting toward a distant sound. The message was clear. Danger was already moving. Martha locked the box again and hung the key around her neck. Her hands trembled, but her voice was steady as she whispered, "We won't be quiet anymore." That afternoon, Willow Creek Elementary buzzed with children rushing from the building. Emily walked with Ranger at her side, his stride matching hers, the school having made exceptions for the dog that never left her. But Ranger's head was low, scanning, his muscles tensed. Across the street, a man leaned against the chain-link fence, leather vest glinting in the sun. His helmet dangled from his hand, tattoos crawling up his arms. Emily's steps faltered. She recognized the patch. Iron serpents. The man smiled, pulling a bag of colorful candies from his pocket. "Hey there, sweetheart. Long day. Come here, and I'll give you a treat. Better than anything at home." Emily froze. Her mother's warning echoed. "Never go with strangers. Hold on to Ranger. He'll know." Ranger growled, a thunderous sound vibrating the air. His teeth bared, his body lowering into combat stance. The biker rattled the candy. "Don't be shy. I just want to be your friend." Before Emily could answer, Ranger lunged. His snarl ripped through the afternoon, sharp and primal. The man stumbled back, startled. The shepherd barked once, the sound echoing like a gunshot. Children down the block turned in shock. Emily clutched Ranger's flank, her small voice breaking but strong. "Stay away from us." The man sneered. "Dogs can be put down." Ranger lunged again, close enough that the biker dropped the bag. Candies scattered across the sidewalk like broken glass. Cursing, he scrambled to his motorcycle. A teacher shouted from the school steps. Parents turned. The biker roared away, exhaust trailing bitterness. Emily collapsed to the sidewalk, arms locked around Ranger's neck. He licked her cheek once, then turned back down the road, still guarding. By evening, the story had spread through town. At the diner, the serpents tried to grab a girl in broad daylight. At the post office, that dog's worth 10 deputies. At church, not a pet, a soldier. Martha walked Emily home, neighbors watching with new eyes. Not at Emily, not at her, but at Ranger. He wasn't just a companion. He was a wall. Emily slipped her hand into Martha's, her other hand never leaving the shepherd's back. "He knew, Grandma, before I did." Martha's throat tightened. Grace's voice whispered in her memory. "He's not just my partner, Mom. He's family. He'll protect Emily when I can't." She looked at the dog, at the fire in his amber eyes. "You were right, Grace," she whispered. Ranger padded ahead, leading them down the street, his tail a banner, his body a vow. And in the hush of Willow Creek, the legend of the soldier dog began. The night pressed heavy over Willow Creek. Inside the small house, the clock ticked too loudly, and Ranger lay at Emily's bedside, ears twitching at every sound. Martha sat alone in the kitchen, Grace's hidden box of letters open beside a cooling cup of coffee. The knock came near midnight, low, deliberate. Not a neighbor's knock. A warning. Ranger's head shot up, a growl rumbling in his chest. Martha's stomach clenched as she opened the back door. The smell of tobacco and leather drifted in first, then the man who had haunted her silence for years. Asher Cole, leader of the Iron Serpents, her brother. The years had scarred him, but the eyes were the same. The boy who once sat at her supper table. Now they carried shadows. "Martha," he rasped. "Asher." Her voice was cold, steady. "You've got some nerve." He stepped in uninvited, closing the door softly. "We need to talk." Ranger moved between them, body taut, teeth flashing in the dim light. Asher eyed the dog with a flicker of respect. He's got more sense than most men I know. Martha gripped the chair back to keep her hands from trembling. Don't charm me. You brought rot into this town. Grace is dead. Emily's afraid of every motorcycle, and you think I'll sit here and listen? At Grace's name, Asher flinched. I didn't want this. Some of those boys don't answer to me anymore. They've been bought. Walsh has them running shipments out of St. Gabriel's. I was blind too long. Martha's voice cracked with rage. You carried the matches. Don't tell me you didn't start the fire. His fist hit the table, rattling the cup. You think I don't know? I gave those boys a family, and now they've turned into something I can't control. Walsh owns them. And me. The silence that followed was sharp as broken glass. Martha searched his face and saw the ruin of the boy she once begged not to leave. Finally she whispered, Why did you protect Emily then? Why stand between her and your men? Asher's jaw clenched. He looked down the hall where the child slept. His voice was almost broken. Because she's blood, Martha. Grace's girl. My niece. My last chance to do something right. The words staggered her. Her knees went weak. Ranger barked once, as if to brand the truth. You should have told me, she hissed. Grace fought cancer alone while you hid behind leather and lies. Asher's voice cracked. I thought Walsh would give her the treatment if I helped him. I thought I was buying her time. It was a lie. By the time I knew, it was too late. Tears burned down Martha's cheeks. She hated him, and yet she heard the raw guilt in his voice. You want forgiveness? I can't give it. Not yet. I'm not asking, he said hoarsely. I just need you to know why I'll keep her safe, even if it kills me. Ranger pressed to Martha's leg, steadying her. She lifted her chin, steel hardening her grief. Then prove it. Because one shadow at her door, Asher, and I'll set this dog on you myself. Ranger growled, as if sealing her vow. Asher gave a hollow smile, more wound than joy. Fair enough, sis. He stepped back into the night, leaving Martha trembling in the dim kitchen light, caught between fury, grief, and the faintest ember of hope that blood might still bind what was broken. Dawn carried an uneasy stillness. Emily sat at the table with her oatmeal, sunlight touching her hair. Ranger lay at her feet, ears flicking at every sound outside. Martha stirred her coffee but didn't drink. Last night's truth pressed against her chest like a stone. Grace had made her promise to protect Emily from cruelty, including truths too heavy for a child. But Emily deserved to know. Grandma? Emily asked suddenly, her spoon pausing. That man yesterday, the one who told the bikers not to hurt me, why did he help? The spoon slipped from Martha's hand. Ranger lifted his head, amber eyes sharp. Emily's voice was steady now, not frightened, curious. Is he a bad man or a good man? Martha reached across the table, taking her granddaughter's hand. Sometimes a person can be both. Emily frowned. Both? Yes. Martha's throat tightened. That man's name is Asher Cole. He's my brother. That makes him your uncle. The little girl froze. My uncle? Yes. He made choices, terrible choices. He leads the serpents, but he's also the man who stopped them from touching you. Both things are true. Emily's chair scraped back. Her voice rose, strained. Uncles are supposed to be good. He's their boss. They scare everyone. How can he be my family? Ranger padded over, pressing against her legs, anchoring her storm. Emily buried her fingers in his fur, clinging. Martha's heart ached. Your mama never told you because it hurt too much. She loved her brother once, but by the time you were born, she'd lost hope. Tears spilled down Emily's cheeks. If he's my uncle, does that mean he loves me? Martha pulled her close, whispering into her hair. I believe he does, in his way. He told me he'll keep you safe. I don't know if I can trust him, but I think he meant it. Ranger stiffened suddenly, growling in his chest. Martha turned toward the window. A figure stood across the street, hands in his jacket, watching. Asher. He didn't knock. He only lingered, eyes locked on the house. For a second, Martha thought she saw something raw. Regret. Blood ties. A ghost of grace. Then it hardened, and he turned away into daylight. Emily whispered, clutching Ranger. I don't know if I like him. Martha kissed her hair. You don't have to. You just have to know you're safe, because you've got a Ranger, and you've got me. Ranger's growl faded, but his eyes never left the door. He didn't trust Asher, not yet. That night, the Iron Serpent's clubhouse sat in silence. Once a feed store, it now smelled of leather, gasoline, and stale smoke. Asher sat alone at the bar, cigarettes smoldering, ghosts pressing in. Memory dragged him back. His father's rage at the kitchen table, Martha's tears begging him to stay, engines roaring outside promising freedom. At 18, he had shaken off his sister's hand and rode into the night, chasing belongings in leather and chrome. He hadn't looked back, until now. Grace's face haunted him most. The notes she'd slipped into his pocket. We miss you. Please come home. He had thought deals with men like Walsh could buy her time. Instead, they had bought her death. Family or gang, he muttered into the smoke. You can't have both. The door creaked. Tanner, his second-in-command, swaggered in. Boss, the men are restless. That kid's mutt is bad for business. Walsh says the dog's gotta go. Asher's jaw tightened. Leave the girl out of it. Tanner smirked. Walsh pays better than lemonade. The dog dies, the heat dies. For the first time, Asher saw it clearly. The serpents weren't his family anymore. They were mercenaries, bought by greed. Get out, he said quietly. Tanner blinked. Boss? I said, get out. Before I forget you were ever mine. Tanner cursed, snatched his helmet, and slammed the door. Asher sat in silence, the words echoing in the empty room. For years he'd called the serpents his family. But looking into Emily's eyes, seeing Ranger stand unflinching between them, he knew where blood truly lived. He crushed the cigarette, his voice a low vow. Family or gang? It's time to choose. And for the first time in decades, Asher Cole leaned toward the choice he should have made all along. The community hall smelled faintly of dust and varnish, its wooden beams groaning with age. On ordinary nights it held bingo, potlucks, quilting. Tonight, every chair was filled, every aisle crammed with townsfolk whose quiet lives had been pressed to the edge. At the front, Mayor Robert Langley shuffled papers, his polite smile fooling no one. Behind him, the American flag drooped, and a chalkboard still listed bake sale totals, a cruelly out-of-place reminder of simpler days. Martha sat in the third row, Emily's small hand locked in her own. Ranger stretched at their feet, ears twitching with every raised voice. It began with Harold Jenkins, the baker. His flour-stained hands trembled as he stood. We can't keep living like this, he said, voice cracking. The serpents bleed us dry. I paid last week. 2 days later, my windows smashed. Pay again or close, they said. That ain't protection. That's a noose. A ripple of agreement surged. Same here. They own the streets. But Frank Miller, the garage owner, rose in defiance. Hold on. You all complain, but my shop's never been busier. Their bikes keep me in work. They pay cash on time. This town was dying before them. Maybe you just don't like where the money comes from. The room erupted. Blood money, someone shouted. You'd sell your soul for greasy dollars, another spat. Martha tightened her grip on Emily's hand. Division was expected, but the venom still cut deep. Please, Mayor Langley stammered, let's remain civil. Civil? Harold barked. My wife's afraid to walk home, and you call this civil? The shouting swelled until a small voice pierced the storm. My mommy died because of people like them. The hall fell silent. Emily stood, tiny shoulders squared, her hand slipping free from Martha's. Her cheeks flushed, but her voice rang steady. She was sick. The hospital said they couldn't help her anymore, but Grandma found papers that said maybe they could, if people had money, and those bikers. She glanced toward the back, where two serpents leaned against the wall. Those bikers worked with the hospital. They scared people, they hurt them, and they helped take away her chance. Gasps rippled through the room. She made me promise to help people when she was gone, Emily continued, her chin quivering. That's why I sell lemonade, and now you sit here fighting about money while bad men run our town. Her voice cracked. I don't care if they pay you on time, Mr. Miller. They stole my mommy. The silence that followed was suffocating. Even the bikers at the back shifted uneasily. Ranger pressed close against Emily's legs, anchoring her with his warmth. Martha rose, her hand steady on her granddaughter's shoulder. You've heard it from a child. What more proof do you need? This isn't business. It's rot, and it's killing us. The mayor fumbled his papers, pale. Mrs. Whitaker, this is tragic, but tragic? Martha's voice blazed. Tragic is what happens when we do nothing. My daughter is dead because Dr. Walsh at St. Gabriel's made deals with these men. And now they circle my granddaughter like wolves. For a moment, no one spoke. Then a voice in the back. She's right. Another. Enough is enough. The tide turned. Faces hardened not with fear, but with resolve. The two serpents exchanged a glance, muttered, and slipped out into the night. Emily sank into her seat, trembling. Martha whispered, You were brave, sweetheart. The ranger resumed his post at their feet, eyes fixed on the door. For the first time, the town looked at one another, not with suspicion, but recognition. The hospital's corridors smelled of bleach and secrets. Martha guided Emily down the hall, Ranger pacing at their side. Emily clutched her mason jar, the coins inside clinking proudly. They entered the administrator's office. Dr. Gregory Walsh stood behind his immaculate desk, his tie perfect, his smile practiced. Emily set the jar down. We raised more this week, Dr. Walsh. Mommy would be happy. For a flicker, his mask slipped. Then he touched the jar with cool fingers. Admirable, he murmured. Martha caught the calculation in his eyes. Not gratitude, but unease. Emily whispered to Ranger, We'll do even better next week. Walsh's smile thinned. That won't be necessary. Martha frowned. Excuse me? Philanthropy complicates more than it helps, Walsh said smoothly. Your granddaughter's efforts attract attention. I would advise you to redirect her energy. Emily blinked. But it's for families who need it. Walsh's gaze slid over her, indifferent. Children rarely understand complexities. Some matters are better left untouched. Ranger stiffened, a growling building. Martha's voice sharpened. She made a promise to her mother. I won't tell her that helping the sick is a problem. The doctor's mask cracked. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a scalpel's edge. Then let me be clear. People who ask too many questions often find themselves in unfortunate circumstances. Accidents happen. Emily shrank back. Her hand clutched Ranger's collar. The shepherd surged forward, teeth bared, a guttural snarl shaking the desk. Walsh flinched back, sweat beading his forehead. The jar rattled from the force of Ranger's growl. "Ranger!" Martha yanked hard on his collar, pulling him back. Emily clung to his neck, whispering, "It's okay, boy." Walsh forced composure, adjusting his tie with trembling fingers. An impressive animal, but dangerous in the wrong company. You'd be wise to keep him on a leash. Martha's eyes burned. Or wiser to keep men like you away from my family. The air crackled between them. Walsh's jaw twitched. End the fundraising. For Emily's sake. For yours. Martha seized the jar, placed it back in Emily's arms, and turned. Ranger walked them out, his amber eyes never leaving Walsh until the door closed. In the hallway, Martha knelt to Emily. "Sweetheart, if anyone ever says something like that again, you come to me. Always." Why was he so mad? We're just helping. Because sometimes helping shines a light on things people want hidden. Emily buried her face in Ranger's fur. He doesn't scare me when Ranger's here. Martha swallowed her fear. Then we keep Ranger close. Always. That night, in the church basement, the air smelled of coffee and wax. Emily colored quietly at the table. Ranger paced until the heavy doors shut, then stretched at her feet, watchful still. Evelyn, the nurse who had once slipped Grace extra blankets, descended the stairs. Her cardigan clung to her shoulders, her face pale. "Martha," she whispered, eyes darting. "I wasn't sure you'd come." "I almost didn't," Martha said. "After Walsh, I don't know who I can trust." Evelyn sat, hands trembling. She stared at Emily's crayons before whispering, "I need to tell you the truth." Martha's jaw tightened. "Then speak." "I didn't want to be part of it," Evelyn said, voice breaking. "But when Walsh brought the serpents in, I had no choice. They threatened my nephew. They said accidents happen. So I signed what they gave me. Looked away when boxes came in. I told myself I was protecting him, but I betrayed everyone else." Emily lifted her head, sensing the weight of the words. Ranger rose too, a low rumble vibrating in his chest. Evelyn's gaze fixed on him. "He knows," she whispered. "Know what?" Martha demanded. Her voice shook as the truth tumbled out. "They're planning to take him, Ranger. Walsh says he's too dangerous, too well-trained, too perceptive. They think if they kill him, you'll have no shield left." The words hit like a blow. Martha gripped Ranger's collar. Emily cried out, throwing her arms around the dog's neck. "No, he's mine. He's Mommy's promise." Ranger pressed against her, steady as stone, his growl now a vow. "When?" Martha choked. "Soon," Evelyn said. "Walsh told them before the week is out. He said, 'A dead dog tells no stories.'" Tears streaked her cheeks. "I couldn't keep silent. That animal has done more for this town than any of us, and they mean to destroy him." Martha rose, gripping the table so hard her knuckles blanched. "You should have told me sooner." "I was afraid," Evelyn whispered. "But no more. I'm not their ally. I'm their hostage." Emily clung to Ranger, her voice fierce through her tears. "A ranger isn't just a dog. He's family. Mommy said family means you never let go. We won't let them take him." Martha placed a trembling hand on her granddaughter's back. Then she fixed her gaze on Evelyn. "If they come for him, they'll go through us first. Through all of us." Evelyn bowed her head, shame and relief colliding. "Then may God give us strength." Outside, the church bells tolled. Martha felt the fragile line between safety and danger snap. Walsh had drawn a line, and now the serpents would come. But Ranger, soldier, guardian, family, would be waiting. The school bell cracked against the crisp autumn air, releasing children into the yard like sparrows freed from a cage. Emily clutched her backpack to her chest, scanning the crowd. No car waited for her. No parent waved. Only Ranger. The German shepherd stood by the fence, tall and alert, his coat gleaming in the sunlight, amber eyes sweeping the yard. To Emily, he wasn't just a dog. He was her shadow, her shield. "Ready, Ranger?" she whispered as she hurried to him. He wagged once, then pressed against her leg, steering her toward the dirt road home. The path was quiet, brittle trees rattling in the wind. Emily hummed, trying to believe it was just another day. But Ranger's ears flicked. His body stiffened. The sound came then. Engines, snarling from two directions. Dust rose. Emily froze. Ahead, chrome flashed in the sun. Behind, more engines cut off escape. 6 men in leather vests with the serpent emblem spread out, dismounting like wolves around prey. "Well, well," sneered one with a scarred jaw, "if it isn't the little lemonade princess." "And her mutt," another spat. "Doc says the dog's more trouble than he's worth." Emily's breath faltered. Nurse Evelyn's words echoed. "They're planning to take him." Ranger stepped forward, pulling from her grip, planting himself between Emily and the men. His body lowered, muscles coiled, growl rising like distant thunder. "Get the girl," the scarred man barked. 2 lunges. Ranger launched faster, slamming into the first, jaws clamping on his arm with surgical precision. The biker screamed, collapsing. Ranger released, already spinning toward the second. Emily shrieked as rough hands grabbed for her backpack. Ranger lunged again, tearing leather, forcing the man back. Emily scrambled behind him, clutching his flank. "Stupid mutt!" another roared, swinging a chain. It whistled through the air, grazing Ranger's back. The shepherd snapped low, seizing the man's leg, dragging him to the ground. Dust and shouts filled the air. 3 bikers pressed in, boots and fists raised. Ranger spun, snapping, forcing them back. His fury was precise, trained, protective. But 6 against 1. He couldn't fight forever. "Ranger!" Emily screamed. The scream carried farther than she knew. From the bakery window, Mrs. Jensen gasped. Mr. Willis, the mailman, dropped his bag and ran. Within minutes, townsfolk poured into the street. Farmers, teachers, shopkeepers. Their fear had simmered long enough. "Enough!" boomed Mr. Carter, the mechanic, stepping forward with a wrench in hand. "Leave the girl alone." Voices rose behind him. "Get out! No more!" The serpents faltered. Ranger snarled, teeth flashing. The circle of townsfolk pressed closer. "This ain't over," the scarred man spat, retreating to his bike. Engines roared to life, fading into the distance. Silence fell. Emily collapsed to her knees, clutching Ranger, sobbing into his dust-streaked coat. He licked her cheek once, eyes still blazing, ears pricked for danger. Mrs. Jensen whispered, "That dog isn't a pet. He's a soldier." Martha came running, pale, heart pounding. She dropped to her knees, pulling Emily close while stroking Ranger's back. "I've got you," she whispered, trembling. "I've got you both." But as Ranger's eyes burned into the horizon, Martha knew the serpents wouldn't forgive this humiliation. And next time, they'd bring more than fists. Cliffhanger. The war for Willow Creek had truly begun. The Serpents' clubhouse, an old lumber mill painted black, throbbed with music and shouts that night. But when Asher Cole walked in, silence fell. Tall, broad-shouldered, streaks of gray in his hair, his presence was thunder. He walked to the center, his boots echoing. Men parted instinctively. At the far wall, the scarred biker shifted. His arm was bandaged, Ranger's bite marks still fresh. He'd led the ambush. He'd expected praise. Instead, Asher's eyes burned with fury. "You disobeyed me," Asher said, his voice cutting steel. "I told you, the girl is untouchable, the dog is off limits, and you—" His glare pinned the man like a nail. "She's just a kid," the biker muttered. "And the mutt's a threat. Walsh wants—" The name wasn't finished. Asher's hand shot out, seizing his jacket, slamming him against the wall. The room gasped. Cards dropped. Music died. "You think I answer to Walsh?" Asher hissed, face inches away. "You think some hospital rat tells me how to run my men?" The biker stammered, but Asher's fist cut him short, smashing into his jaw. Blood sprayed. Another blow, and another. By the third, the man sagged, sliding down the wall. Asher turned, chest heaving, voice thunder. "You cross me again, you're done. You go near that girl, you're done. You touch that dog, you're done. I don't care if you've worn these colors 20 years. You'll leave them here or not at all." No one moved. Fear thickened the room. Outside, hidden behind a rusted truck, Emily crouched. She had begged Ranger to sneak out, needing to see who this man really was, the one who had saved her. She peered through a crack, her hand tangled in Ranger's fur. She saw the blows, the blood, the roar of his rage. Her chest squeezed. "He's helping me," she whispered, as if to make it true. But her voice trembled, because what she saw looked like the monsters he punished. Inside, Asher released the man, letting him crumple. He looked around, voice low but iron. "You follow me. You follow my rules. Walsh doesn't own us. No one decides what happens to that girl but me." Emily's heart twisted. That girl. Not her name. Not family. Possession. She backed away, tugging Ranger with her, tears blurring the glow of the clubhouse lights. "Is he a protector?" she whispered. "Or just another bad man?" Ranger stayed silent, his growl low, amber eyes locked on Asher. Emily wanted to believe in her uncle, but all she saw tonight was a man who ruled through fear. The storm pressed low over Willow Creek that night. Emily slept upstairs, curled against Ranger, but Martha couldn't rest. She sat in the kitchen with a lamp lit, Grace's photo before her. "I should have protected you better," she whispered. "Now I can't lose her too." A motorcycle rumbled outside. A knock followed, firm, steady. She opened the door to Asher, rain on his jacket, storm-gray eyes beneath the lantern glow. "What do you want?" she asked coldly. To talk, he said. Stripped of swagger, he was just a brother on the porch. Martha let him in, though her voice cut sharp. Emily saw you tonight. She saw the blood on your hands. You call it protection, but to her you looked no different than the monsters you punished. His jaw tightened. They disobeyed me. They put her at risk. No, Martha snapped. You chose violence because it's all you know. If you love this family, prove it. Asher sank into a chair, rubbing his face, lines deepened by years of regret. You think I don't know what I look like? I saw it in her eyes. Grace's eyes. Fear. I never wanted that. Then tell me why, Martha pressed. Why tie yourself to those animals? He looked at Grace's photo, voice breaking. Because I thought it would save her. Martha froze. Grace? He nodded, fists white on the table. Walsh promised the trial treatment if I helped him. If I moved his shipments, silenced families, gave him my men. I thought I was buying her time. Instead, I bought my chains. The words shattered her. Tears burned down her cheeks. You let him use you. Grace died because of his corruption, and you became his shield. Shame bowed his head. I failed her, but I won't fail Emily. Martha leaned closer, voice iron. Then prove it. Stop Walsh. Stop the serpents. Not as their leader, as her uncle. Silence thickened the room. Ranger padded down the stairs, growling low, his eyes locked on Asher. Finally, Asher reached into his jacket, pulling out a folded paper, yellowed at the edges. He slid it across the table. Walsh's first promise. My contract with the devil. Martha stared at the damning ink, her tears blurring the words. She lifted her gaze, steady and unyielding. Choose, Asher, family, or the serpents. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he nodded, voice hoarse. Family. If I have to burn the serpents to the ground, I will. Ranger's growl faded, though his watchful eyes stayed fixed. Upstairs, Emily murmured in her sleep, her small voice calling for her mother. The sound pierced the silence. Martha closed her eyes, whispering, Then prove it. For her. For the first time in decades, Asher Cole had chosen blood over leather. But choosing and proving were two different battles, and the war for Willow Creek was far from done. Morning in Willow Creek carried a brittle tension. Even the ring of the church bell sounded hollow as Martha, Emily, and Ranger walked toward St. Gabriel's Hospital. Emily clutched the leash with pale hands, while the German shepherd moved ahead, his body taut, nose flicking at every scent. Martha saw it in him first, ears twitching, muscles coiling. He made no sound, but his silence screamed a warning. Grandma, Emily whispered, tugging her sleeve. He knows. At the loading dock, workers wheeled crates stamped with medical supply logos. Everything looked ordinary, until Ranger froze. He pressed a paw against one crate, growl building low in his chest. Emily staggered, bracing the leash. What is it, boy? Martha whispered. Ranger circled until he found another crate, smudged with faint black ink. His stance stiffened, tail rigid. Emily's eyes widened. He says it's bad. A tall worker glanced over, clipboard under his arm. For a heartbeat, his eyes flickered. Recognition, alarm. Then he barked orders. The crates were hurried inside, except a few loaded into a truck that rolled away from the dock. Ranger lunged against the leash, barking sharp. Emily's voice trembled. We have to follow. Grace's letters echoed in Martha's mind. warnings about withheld treatments, partnerships in the shadows. She looked at Emily's pleading face, then at the dog vibrating with certainty. "All right," she said, her voice steady. "We follow." The truth wasn't behind hospital walls. It was on the road ahead. Martha's old sedan rattled along cracked back roads, trailing the truck at a distance. Ranger sat upright in the back seat, nose pressed to the window, body alive with focus. The truck turned down an abandoned logging road, disappearing into a rust-streaked warehouse. Martha killed the engine behind a thicket. Silence pressed close, broken only by Ranger's steady breathing and Emily's shallow gasps. Inside the warehouse, under dim, swinging bulbs, the truth loomed in towers of crates. Boxes stamped with medical logos had been torn open, spilling counterfeit pills and cloudy vials. The sour chemical stench burned Martha's nose. Emily's voice cracked. "Grandma, that's what Mommy needed." Martha's knees weakened. Grace's suspicions, every whisper, had been true. She gripped the frame of a broken window to steady herself. Ranger pawed at one box. Scrawled across the side in black ink was a single word: trial. Her stomach turned. These weren't just counterfeit supplies. They were stolen trial drugs. The very medicine Grace had been denied, siphoned off and sold through the serpents. Emily clutched her grandmother's hand, tears spilling. "We have to stop them. Mommy died because of this." Martha pulled her close, whispering through tears, "And we will. I swear it." The door groaned open. A pale figure slipped inside. Nurse Evelyn, wrapped in a heavy coat. Her eyes darted, landing on Martha. "You followed me?" Martha hissed. "No," Evelyn whispered. "Walsh told me to meet someone here. I didn't expect—" Her gaze fell on the crates. Her face crumpled. "Dear Lord, it's worse than I thought." Emily's voice trembled. "They kept Mommy's medicine here, didn't they?" Evelyn crouched, tears brimming. "Your mama should have had treatment she never got. I stayed quiet because they threatened my nephew. I thought silence kept him safe, but it only helped them." "Then help me now," Martha snapped. "We need proof." With shaking hands, Evelyn pulled a battered digital camera from her bag. "Maybe tonight, I will finally get brave." They worked quickly. Evelyn snapped photos of labels scratched out, bottles relabeled, ledger sheets listing payments. Martha held the light steady, her hands trembling. Emily crouched by Ranger, whispering, "It's not enough. People need to see it." Her chin lifted, fierce through her tears. "I don't want another girl to lose her mommy like I did." Martha brushed her hair back, voice breaking. "You're braver than I'll ever be." The truth was captured in photos and files, but shadows shifted outside. The hunters were near. Ranger's growl rolled low just before the door banged open. 3 iron serpents stormed in, boots crunching glass. Their leader, a man with a jagged scar, sneered. "Well, well. Charity workers snooping where they don't belong?" His gaze found Emily. "That's Brighton's brat. Orders say the mutt goes. Maybe the kid too." Before Martha could move, Ranger launched. His body slammed the first biker into the crates, jaws tearing leather. Another swung a steel pipe. Ranger twisted, snapping close enough to force him back. "Run, Emily!" Martha cried. Emily clung to the files, refusing to leave. "No! He needs me!" The third biker lunged. Evelyn, desperate, swung her camera across his face. Plastic shattered, but the blow bought a second. Ranger spun, planting himself between the men and his family, growl deep, eyes blazing. Then another voice thundered. Enough! The bikers froze. From the shadows, Asher Cole stepped into the light. His presence silenced the room. Martha's chest clenched with fury and relief all at once. Scarface spat blood. "Boss, we caught them." Orders were clear. "Walsh wants the dog gone." Asher's eyes flicked to the crates, then to Emily clutching her mother's files. His face hardened, but his voice cracked with something raw. "She's family," Scarface sneered. "Family or not, Walsh gives the orders." Silence stretched. Ranger's growl filled it, unrelenting. Emily's hand pressed to his back, steadying him. Finally, Asher spoke. His voice was sharp enough to cut steel. "My orders are the only ones that matter. The girl and the dog are untouchable. Anyone who thinks otherwise, walk out now." The bikers bristled, weapons twitching. Scarface snarled, "You're choosing them over us?" Asher's gaze locked on Emily, her chin lifted in defiance that mirrored grace. "I'm choosing what should have been chosen long ago." "Out!" he barked. One by one, the serpents retreated. Scarface lingered, dark with warning. "Walsh won't forgive this." "Let him come," Asher growled. "I'll be waiting." The door slammed. Silence returned, heavy and trembling. Martha sagged against the wall. Evelyn wiped tears, the broken camera in her hand useless now, but its memory card intact. Emily buried her face in Ranger's fur, whispering, "Mommy will finally be heard." Asher stood apart, the weight of his choice pressing down. He had turned against Walsh, against his own men. There would be no going back. Martha's voice broke the silence, sharp and unyielding. "If you truly mean to protect her, then protect her. No more games. No more lies." Asher's eyes met hers, storm gray and weary. "I will," he said, his voice hoarse. Outside, engines roared into the night. Loyalty splintered, war inevitable. Inside, a little girl held her mother's files like a torch, while Ranger stood guard, chest heaving, eyes burning like embers. The serpents had been warned. Walsh had been defied. And now, the true battle for Willow Creek had begun. Rain hammered Willow Creek, blurring streetlights into halos. Martha's house glowed faintly against the storm, a fragile fortress at the edge of town. Inside, Emily curled on the couch. Ranger pressed close against her legs. The files lay open on the table, pages fluttering whenever the wind rattled the walls. Martha's teacup had gone cold in her hands. Every time she looked at her granddaughter, she saw Grace's shadow, the promise of a girl who died betrayed by those who swore to save her. The front door opened without knocking. Rain and leather swept in as Asher Cole stepped across the threshold. Water dripped from his jacket, pooling on the floorboards. Emily's small voice broke the silence. "You came back." Asher's gaze softened. "Yeah, kid. I came back." Martha rose, suspicion and sorrow carved into her face. "Why? To drag us deeper into your darkness?" "No." His voice was gravel, but stripped of swagger. He reached up, pulled off the leather vest that had been his armor for decades. The iron serpent's emblem gleamed under the lamplight before he tossed it to the floor. "I'm done." Emily blinked. "Done with what?" "With them," he said. "With Walsh. With the lies. It ends tonight." Martha's breath caught. Words, Asher. You've given plenty of those. What makes this different? He looked at Emily, at the files, at Ranger, who growled low but didn't move. Because for the first time in years, I remembered who I was. Grace's brother. Your uncle. His eyes burned, not with menace, but regret. And I won't let them hurt her, or you again. Before Martha could answer, headlights slashed across the curtains. Engines rumbled outside, shaking the house. They followed me, Asher muttered, pulling a pistol from his waistband. It's time. The door burst open. Scarface stormed in with 4 serpents at his back. You've lost it, Cole. Throwing in with a brat and a mutt. Walsh won't forgive this. I don't answer Walsh. Asher's voice was steel now. And neither do the serpents. Not anymore. Scarface laughed. You built this club on blood and fear. And now you want to tear it down? You're weak. I'm not weak. Asher stepped forward. I'm finished letting men like you use my family as leverage. Scarface's smile twisted. Then you're done. He lunged. Ranger exploded across the room, slamming one biker to the ground with a snarl. Asher met Scarface head-on, fists colliding like thunder. Furniture splintered, glass shattered. The blade flashed, grazing Asher's arm, blood blooming. You betrayed us, Scarface spat. No, Asher growled, slamming him into the wall. I betrayed myself the day I let Walsh buy us. Scarface roared, throwing him into the table. For a heartbeat, Asher staggered, until Emily cried out, Uncle Asher! He froze. Her eyes, Grace's eyes, were wide with both terror and faith. It was enough. With a surge beyond rage, Asher twisted free, disarmed Scarface, and drove him to the floor. The blade clattered across the room. He pressed his forearm to Scarface's throat, eyes blazing. This ends now. The serpents are done. The bikers wavered. 2 slipped out. 1 lingered, then followed. Only 1 stayed, lowering his weapon. Asher turned, blood on his sleeve, chest heaving. Then we rebuild. Not for Walsh. For us. For them. His eyes flicked to Martha and Emily. Emily's voice was small but steady. You're really on our side? His throat tightened. I should have been a long time ago. Ranger's tail twitched once. Even he seemed to accept it. For now. The storm had not passed. It only shifted its fury from sky to streets. By the time Martha, Evelyn, Emily, and half the town reached St. Gabriel's, the air reeked of gasoline and rain. Each face was lined with grief and rage, parents, widows, neighbors who had endured Walsh's shadow too long. Emily clung to Ranger's collar as the shepherd's stance bristled. He already sensed the storm inside the walls. Evelyn clutched the folder of evidence like scripture. If the state sees these records, Walsh is finished. The hospital lobby gleamed sterile under fluorescent light. A clerk stammered as the crowd streamed in. What's going on? Where's Dr. Walsh? Martha demanded. The clerk's eyes darted to the elevators. Enough. They surged forward. Emily struggled to keep pace until Ranger leaned into her, guiding every step. The elevator doors were closing when Evelyn shouted, There! Through the narrowing gap, Walsh's polished mask cracked, sweat beading, leather briefcase stuffed with files clutched like treasure. His eyes widened, then the doors slid shut. For a heartbeat, despair rippled. Then Ranger bolted for the stairwell, claws sparking on tile. The stairwell echoed with pounding boots, the metallic clang of tags. On the 3rd-floor landing, Ranger froze, nose lifted, growl low and certain. He had the scent. They burst through fire doors into a corridor lined with patient rooms. At the far end, Walsh fled, coat flaring, briefcase bursting papers. He shoved through double doors into the administrative wing. Ranger's bark cracked the hall like a gunshot. Walsh fumbled at his office lock, hands shaking. The latch jammed. In that heartbeat, Ranger slammed into the door. Wood splintered. Walsh toppled, the briefcase spilling across the floor. Files exploded like snow. Patient names, denial forms, falsified trials. Walsh scrambled, clawing papers. But Ranger was already on him, jaws clamping his sleeve, dragging him down. His cry was thin, pitiful. Emily froze in the doorway, chest heaving. "That's him," she whispered. "That's the man who let Mommy die." Walsh's arrogance cracked. "You don't understand. It was business." Martha's voice shook like glass. "You called my daughter's death business?" She jabbed a trembling hand at the files. "You sold lives for profit." Ranger's growl deepened. Emily placed her hand on his back. "You can't hurt anyone anymore. Ranger won't let you." Sirens wailed closer, red light spilling through rain-slick windows. Officers stormed in, weapons drawn. "Call him off," one barked. Martha crouched, her hand firm on his collar. "Ranger, hold." The shepherd obeyed, muscles taut, eyes still locked on Walsh. Officers dragged him up, cuffed him. Papers lay exposed, proof Walsh couldn't bury. Walsh hissed, "You'll regret this. You don't know who you're dealing with." Martha's voice rose over him. "We're dealing with a coward, and tonight your lies end." Cheers erupted from townsfolk in the hall. Evelyn wept openly. Emily buried her face in Ranger's fur, and for the first time, Willow Creek tasted hope. Walsh was in chains, but his shadow still lingered. The night wasn't done with blood. The hospital lot seethed with flashing red and blue. Bikers in cuffs, townsfolk shouting. Officers loading evidence into cruisers. Emily held Ranger's collar when the motorcycle roared. Scarface's final act of defiance. Headlights cut the storm. A gun lifted. "Down!" someone shouted. The shot cracked like thunder. Asher shoved Martha and Emily behind a cruiser, twisting into the line of fire. The bullet struck his shoulder, spinning him to the ground. Ranger's roar shook the storm. He launched at Scarface, slamming man and machine into asphalt. The gun skittered away as officers swarmed, dragging him down. Emily's scream pierced the chaos. "Uncle Asher!" She broke free of Martha's arms, darting to him. Ranger circled, hackles raised, guarding them. Asher's face was pale under streetlights, rain streaking with blood. Yet when Emily knelt, he smiled faintly. "You called me that." Tears blurred her cheeks. "Don't move. Please. You're bleeding. We'll get help." Her little hands pressed against his wound with her cardigan. Martha knelt opposite, voice shaking. "Stay with us, Asher. Not like you left Grace." His eyes flickered at the name. Grace. It was both a wound and a prayer. He looked at Emily, clinging to him. "She has her eyes. Same fire." Emily sobbed. "Mommy said family is forever. You're my family. You can't go." For a moment, the outlaw stripped away. He wasn't a leader or a traitor, just a brother, an uncle desperate for redemption. His bloody hand brushed her cheek. "Protect her better than I ever protected Grace." Martha's tears fell. "You've done more tonight than you realize. You gave her faith in family again." Emily bent low, forehead against his. "I forgive you, Uncle Asher." His lips curved in the ghost of a smile. "That's more grace than I deserve." Paramedics rushed in. Gauze pressed. Tourniquets tightened. Vitals shouted. Asher's eyes fluttered, locking on Emily one last time. "You're the best part of us." Then he slipped under. The stretcher lifted, ambulance doors slammed, sirens wailed into the night. Emily clung to Ranger, burying her face in his neck. The shepherd stood like a sentinel, rain dripping from his muzzle, body shielding hers even as the world roared around them. Martha wrapped them both in trembling arms. As the ambulance disappeared, Emily whispered into Ranger's fur, "He came back. He really came back." And in the storm's dying breath, Willow Creek knew this fight had cost blood, but it had also bought something more. A chance at healing. The dawn that broke over Willow Creek carried a weight unlike any other. For years, the town had lived under the Iron Serpent's shadow, their engines roaring through the streets like a storm of intimidation. But that morning, silence stretched across the valley, not the silence of fear, but of change. At St. Gabriel's Hospital, police cruisers lined the drive, and state investigators strode through glass doors with briefcases and purpose. For once, the law had come not to look away, but to confront the rot at its core. On the hospital steps, Martha stood with Emily and Ranger pressed against the girl's leg. His coat still glistened from the night storm, his brown eyes sharp and watchful. Emily clutched her mason jar, half filled with rainwater now, as if it carried her mother's promise. Inside, Dr. Gregory Walsh sat in his office for the last time. Sleepless nights had carved away his arrogance. Papers lay scattered across his desk, desperate attempts to fabricate explanations for files already seized. The door burst open. 2 investigators entered, flanked by officers. "Dr. Walsh," one said coldly, "you are under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, and criminal negligence resulting in patient deaths." Walsh rose sharply. "You can't prove anything." But the words faltered when Grace Brighton's file landed on his desk, with photographs of falsified trials, bank transfers, and the audio recording Evelyn had risked everything to preserve. Walsh's hands trembled. For the first time, his mask slipped, revealing not power, but fear. As the cuffs clicked around his wrists, his empire collapsed. Patients he had denied hope now lined the corridors, their silent faces delivering the final verdict. The hospital board fell soon after, escorted out in rain-soaked suits, reputations dissolving like paper in water. For once, no one looked away. Emily, her small hand resting on Ranger's fur, whispered, "They can't hurt people anymore." Across town, the Iron Serpents faced their reckoning. Once a brotherhood of desperation, they had grown into a machine of extortion. Now, with their leader Asher unconscious in the hospital, their grip fractured. Scarface and his loyalists were either jailed or scattered. Yet a dozen men stood in the town square that morning, their leather vests folded neatly at their feet. Cole Jensen, one of Asher's oldest riders, stepped forward. "We can't undo the harm we caused," he said, voice raw. "But Asher showed us another road. If you'll let us, we want to help rebuild what we broke." The words hung heavy. These men had once terrorized the town, and now they asked to lay bricks and mend windows. Martha's heart wrestled with memory and survival, until Emily tugged her hand. "Grandma," she said softly, "Mommy always said people can change, if they choose to." The crowd murmured. Slowly, townsfolk began to nod. By afternoon, serpent hands that once clenched fists now hauled lumber, patched roofs, and swept glass from shop fronts. For the first time, Willow Creek felt the first fragile signs of healing. 1 week later, the town gathered in the park. Banners waved, flowers lined the square, and at the front sat a polished medal gleaming under the sun. Sheriff Thompson cleared his throat, his voice carrying the weight of years of silence. "There are many heroes in Willow Creek," he said. "Some wear badges, some wear uniforms, and some wear fur and 4 paws." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Emily clapped, beaming. "Ranger," the sheriff continued, "served his country as a K-9, and when others saw only a little girl with a lemonade stand, he saw someone worth guarding with his life. Today, on behalf of this town, I present him with the Medal of Civic Honor." Emily guided Ranger forward, her hand resting proudly on his thick neck. The shepherd stood steady as the medal was fastened around his collar, sunlight glinting across the engraved surface. The cheer that rose wasn't loud, but deep. A collective exhale. Martha wiped her eyes as Emily knelt and wrapped her arms around Ranger. "You're not just Mommy's soldier anymore," the girl whispered into his fur. "You're everyone's." At the heart of the square stood Emily's stand, freshly painted, its letters bright yellow against white. "Lemonade for Love. All proceeds help families in need." Neighbors donated wood and lemons. Families painted signs, and investigators helped register it as a charity. Newspapers called it Lemonade for Love. Emily only knew it as Mommy's Promise. Each cup she poured was more than lemonade. It was a memory turned into hope. Ranger never left her side. Children patted him, parents offered thanks, and Emily would proudly announce, "This is Ranger. He's my best friend and a hero." At night, Martha watched from her porch as Emily painted signs or counted donations, Ranger dozing faithfully at her feet. The crickets hummed, the air smelled of lemons and sugar, and for the first time, silence felt like peace. A year slipped by quietly, the wounds of Willow Creek softening into memory. Flowers bloomed along storefronts, children laughed in the square, and the roar of motorcycles was replaced by hammers rebuilding homes. But on one summer morning, it wasn't the stand that mattered. It was the quiet walk up the hill outside town. The grass shimmered with dew under Ranger's steady paws. His medal glinted in the sun, though age now showed in the stiffness of his joints. Emily, now 8, carried a mason jar of pale gold lemonade, slices of lemon floating like suns. Martha followed with a bouquet of wildflowers. They stopped beneath an old oak tree, its branches spreading wide like a shelter. The grave lay at its base. Grace Brighton, beloved daughter, mother, and friend. Emily knelt, setting the jar gently at the stone's foot. Her fingers lingered as if she were offering not just lemonade, but the courage she had gathered through the year. "Hi, Mommy," she whispered. "We kept your word. The stand is bigger now. It's helping lots of families. Grandma says it's making a difference. And Ranger, he never let go. He still guards me every day." Martha laid the flowers down, her hand brushing Emily's shoulder. Her eyes glistened, but her voice was peaceful. "Grace," she murmured, "your little girl is braver than all of us. She carries you in every step she takes." The oak leaves rustled in the breeze, as though Grace herself had answered. That evening, Martha sat on the porch as Emily's laughter spilled through the house. Ranger rested at her feet, his medal catching the soft light of dusk. The weight she had carried for years, grief, guilt, fear, lifted just enough for her to breathe differently. She remembered Grace's last words, fragile but fierce. Promise me she'll grow up knowing kindness still wins. Looking at Emily and Ranger, Martha whispered into the night, Grace, you can rest now. She's safe. She's strong. And I'm not alone anymore. The crickets sang. The air was sweet with lemon and sugar, and for the first time in years, Martha believed the peace would last. Willow Creek, once broken, had been reborn, not by force, but by a little girl's promise, a shepherd's loyalty, and a town's choice to change. Emily reached out, resting her small palm against the stone. I miss you every day, she said, but I'm not scared anymore. We're okay. We're a family, even if it looks different now. Ranger moved closer, lowering himself until his body touched the edge of the stone. His muzzle rested on the grass, as if he, too, were keeping vigil. His loyalty was wordless, but eternal. Something no grave, no passing of years, could take away. Martha watched them both, her heart swelling with a mixture of sorrow and gratitude. She thought of Asher, still recovering but present in Emily's life now, as the uncle he should have been. She thought of the town that had nearly broken under corruption, but now stood mending, piece by piece. And she thought of Grace, whose final request, help others, had become a legacy far beyond her own family. The three of them sat there for a long while, the lemonade jar catching the sunlight, the wildflowers bending in the wind. It was not silence they felt, but presence, of love, of memory, of something larger holding them together. Finally, Emily rose. She brushed the grass from her knees and took Ranger's leash in her hand. Come on, boy, she said softly. Mommy knows we're okay now. As they walked down the hill, the oak tree stood tall behind them, its branches waving like a quiet blessing. The jar of lemonade remained by the headstone, a golden promise that love could outlast grief, that even the smallest stand of wood and nails could rebuild a town, and that the bond between a child and her dog could carry a legacy across generations. In the years to come, Willow Creek would tell many stories, of corruption exposed, of a gang dissolved, of justice served. But the story that endured most was simpler. A little girl, her grandmother, and a German shepherd who guarded them both. Family rebuilt, hope is restored, and the loyalty of a dog eternal. Sometimes the most powerful stories aren't about battles won or villains defeated, but about the quiet loyalty of a dog who refuses to leave our side. German shepherds remind us that love isn't measured in words, but in watchful eyes, steady steps, and the comfort of knowing we're never alone. Their devotion has a way of softening even the hardest days and reminding us of the simple truth. Family comes in many forms, and often it has 4 paws. If you've ever wanted to deepen that bond with your own dog, there are some wonderful resources out there that share gentle ways to build trust, communication, and companionship. No pressure, just something that might bring you closer to the loyal friend already sitting at your feet. Thank you for spending this time with me and with these stories. May they remind you to hold your dog a little closer tonight, because in their eyes, you are their whole world.